if you don't really want something and you're shoulding yourself, you'll say, I should do this. I'm supposed to do this. I have to do this. I need to do this. The truth is you're not going to be disciplined in your should. So first, the really important thing is to pay attention and focus on what you would really love to shift. Where you say, I want this. I choose this. I would love to have this.
Welcome to Lessons in Leverage, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of success. We'll help you unlock the secrets of leverage so you can amplify your impact in the world. Here is your host, Spencer Lowe.
Welcome back to another episode of Lessons in Leverage. I'm your host, Spencer Lowe, and today I'm joined by Carly Pepin, an expert in personal development who specializes in helping people achieve their potential by reshaping their mindset. Carly is here to share actionable insights on how embracing discomfort and fostering self-discipline can lead to life-changing breakthroughs. Carly, super excited to have you. I love to start with just a little icebreaker. And I noticed in reading about you that you love yoga. What is your favorite yoga position and why?
Thanks, Spencer. It's great to be here. And I don't know if I have a favorite yoga position, but when I'm doing yoga, my favorite times are when I'm doing something I hate and my teacher can actually share a really great insight on how I can shift my physiology to give me a new experience of it. And then all of a sudden I feel a part of my body that I never felt before. And that's what I love about it. So usually it comes from a posture that I absolutely hate.
Well, it's a great metaphor for life.
Yeah.
There's always pain around growth. I don't think I've had any meaningful growth that wasn't a little bit uncomfortable. And that's, an area that you're an expert in and that we're excited to dive into because we want to help the audience find those areas where they need to lean into some pain in their life and then develop some leverage to get more out of life. And I'd love to start just by hearing a little bit about what started your journey. Was there maybe some pain or maybe something that for you fostered this journey onto personal development, building a whole practice and coaching business around helping people with their mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a significant quantity of pain. So my perception was that, LA was the cause of all the problems and I was depressed, I had anxiety, eating disorder, all that fun stuff. And so I moved.
LA probably.
I've it definitely wasn't the cause. It's now my favorite place in the world. I love it here. But it was my perception. So I decided to move to Australia because that seemed like the best idea at the time. And when I got there, all of the things that I thought were the cause of my problems disappeared and internally things just got significantly worse. And that's when I realized it wasn't coming from the outside, it was coming from the inside. And I found my first coach after that. We really focused on human behavior. So it wasn't traditional therapies in a sense, which work for some people but weren't working for me. And so we focused on human behavior, those dynamics, incorporating purpose, values, creating that within my life and really helping to empower me in those different areas of life. And that really started to transform my life very quickly. It was about 3 months when I started to see really dramatic changes. And I just remember telling her, you guys, sign me up. Yeah. Who's your teacher? Who do I need to know that sign me up? And I've been studying ever since. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what is it that helped you to realize? I mean, was it just the shift of moving, from LA to Australia, or was there anything else that helped you start to realize what some of the internal dynamics were that needed to be addressed since the external world wasn't really what was causing the problem?
Yeah, so definitely it's how I was feeling on a day-to-day basis. So, there's this perception that once all this stuff is gone, I'm gonna feel better, right? And so when you go and that's proven wrong and you're like, "Well, I feel even worse and things are getting worse and I actually just I'm not okay." And so when you're starting to feel different and it's not the way you expected. It's actually worse than you expected, and it's worse than you were before. You're gonna take notice. You really are gonna take note. Funny, it's also where I found yoga, so I found my coach and I found yoga at that time. So both were really helpful.
Yeah, and so as you went on that journey, then what did you learn about sort of self-awareness and growth? Because, if your story is that it's the outside world that's at fault. It's LA that's at fault. It's, other people are the problem, then that can be really disempowering. And so sometimes it's hard in that environment to start to work on yourself. So what was the importance of your self-awareness in that growth?
Yeah, so definitely the dynamic of shifting from, the outside external blame to internal, what's actually going on. What's the root cause of what's going on? How do we address these root causes? Where are my misperceptions? How can I shift my perceptions? And really becoming, we talk about becoming that creator of our own environment, but how do we actually do it? And it's kind of taking this radical responsibility where you realize, like, hey, this isn't a crapshoot. Even the circumstances and the challenges you go through, like, you're a part of it. You're one of 2 or one of many involved in this situation, and it's like, "Well, why are you there? Out of all the places on this planet that you could have been, why in this particular challenge?" And so it's cool because it's like the more that we can find those answers, ask those questions, the more we can understand why we're attracted to that dynamic. Sometimes people are concerned because 'cause they're like, "I don't wanna think these specific thoughts because I might attract it," right? And it's like, "No, that's not how it works." It's not about thinking positive or negative. You think positive thoughts, you're not actually gonna attract only positive things, or you think negative, you won't even attract those negative things. You'll create life circumstances based on specifically what you're meant to understand, what challenges you're meant to go through to experience, and things that you truly want and love to authentically experience. So there'll be things that are challenging and supportive for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what are some of those techniques for breaking through those mental barriers? What are some of the techniques that you focus on to help people get more leverage over their mindset?
Yeah, the main focus on is finding the imbalances within the perceptions. So we'll either have an overinflated positive perception or a deflated negative perception. Most people, they focus on the deflated, the negative perception, the shame, the guilt, the resentment, and they see and notice that quickly. And so we haven't really been taught to notice this overinflation on the positive side as well. Because if something has too many positives, what are you? You're blind to the downsides, you're blind to the other side. So, it's like that funny story. It's like, wow, I met the most amazing partner, the most amazing potential partner. And I can't believe it. This guy or girl, it's like the best thing that ever happened to me. And then 2 months later, you're like, stalker won't leave me alone. Right. And it's like, how did that extreme situation occur? Well, you're only focusing on the one side. So you're surprised by the other side because you ignored all the signs and signals that were already there. So that's why we don't want to focus on a positivity mindset in a sense. We want to focus on a balanced, grateful mindset. Because when you see both of these sides, this goes with romantic partners, business partners, you see the things that, you love and that are going to support you, but you're also going to pay attention to the things that are going to challenge you. And then you ask yourself those questions is like, okay, does this work for me? Is this something that I can take on? And also, is this something that will help our business to thrive? Because sometimes the very things that are challenging is like, yeah, that's going to help me thrive in business or life. If having a person like that around is tough, but that's gonna do me some good, right? So it's like we really want to focus on balancing our perception, right? And a balanced perception isn't everything's always good or everything's always bad. A balanced perception is there's both sides in each situation. And when we see it, we're more objective, we're more centered, we're not emotionally driven towards seeking a positive or avoiding a negative. So it draws the emotions out as well. So that removes the reactivity, which gives us a greater emotional intelligence, lets us be present in what actually is. It's pretty cool. I know I've simplified a very complicated process, but it's just
Sort of just the one hand that I think has a lot to unpack. So I actually wanted to circle back to one of those things, which is said, I think I can't remember the exact word, but it was something like breaking out of the reactivity. Tell me more about that.
yeah, so when we're reacting to something, our emotions are indicators that we're either overly challenged or overly supported, right? And so we have balanced emotions. When we're grateful, we're in a balanced state. When we're inspired, we're in a balanced state. We can be enthusiastic about things and be in an inspired state. But in those states, we're not focusing on one or the other. We're seeing everything and the whole of an experience. We're seeing both sides. When I talk about the reactivity, we're emotionally reacting based on our perceptions. If we perceive something has more negatives and positives, right, what we'll wind up doing is we'll have a reaction to that. And usually that's some visceral reaction, an emotional reaction of frustration, anger, resentment. We feel pain, we feel fear of that individual or experience, right? So we can have all these sort of emotions that come around that. There's also the emotions that come around when we have more positives than negatives, right? And in those cases, we can really get if it's more positive than the negatives on ourselves, we get really inflated and self-righteous. And so we get really puffed up, we get overly excited, we think we're the best, we think we're awesome, we think. Or if it's something on the outside, we'll put it on a pedestal. We'll get overexcited. All we see is the good. But it's like it's funny because this is again that people don't teach you. If you feel the energy between elation and this inflation is kind of manic. It's like watching a kid who just ate a popsicle and is all sugar high, right? If I get a kid, like, yeah, and just gave him like a cup of sugar, what would we say? We'd be like, that kid's like freaking out, right? We do that as adults, but don't catch it because we think it only comes from sugar and it doesn't come from sugar. It comes when we have too many perceived positives over the actual negatives, where if they don't even exist, you are that kid on sugar. And here's what happens, just like the kid on sugar crashes and burns, you're going to crash and burn. And so that's what I say is like pay attention to those emotions, not just the sadness, but also the elation, the over exaggeration, like the things where you're like, oh, all spun out and excited. Like that's also an emotion that's, wisdom to pay attention to because you will crash and burn, just like the sugar kid.
Yeah. I think it's an important point, and this concept of listening to your emotions. I know that sometimes the hard ones to listen to are the painful ones, the discomfort or the uncomfortable emotions that come up. And I was just recently at a conference where Michael Singer spoke, who wrote The Untethered Soul, and he talks about this idea of like, we want to sort of close off, and we think we're going to avoid pain by closing off to these emotions when they start to come up. And something that really stuck with me was just the simple words of staying open to that and really feeling it. And that just came to mind as I was listening to you, this idea that if you stay open to those feelings and are able to observe them, that empowers you then to really make decisions that can make your life better, to see reality, to not get overinflated or super negative and be on the big swings, but really be able to see things as they are and then move through them. And I think that we live in a world that is constantly throwing at us numbing options. And I think I thought a lot about this after I had this feeling of like, wow, staying open is really important. What do I do to not stay open? What are these things in my life? And by far the most for me, and I'm sure I'm the only one, is my phone. If I go on my phone, if I go on social media, it's a numbing agent. It immediately takes you away from needing to experience that emotion. So that's sort of a two-part question here. All that context is to ask, one, what do you see people doing? Or how could people maybe recognize that they're closing off and they're not sitting with that emotion and observing it the way that you're recommending? And two, why is that important? Why is the pain or the discomfort important for being able to change?
Yeah, and so this is multifaceted question. Yeah, so multifaceted. When we think about the first aspect is here, don't judge yourself if you're shutting off every now and then. I actually blocked out a traumatic memory for decades because I didn't have a solution on how to clear it. As soon as I got a solution, I was like, is that real? And then I sat down and I did this process around it and I just burst into tears of, going through the process, gratitude. Like I just remember crying so hard and being like, it was real. Like, and I just blocked it out because I didn't have the necessary tools, right? So sometimes we judge ourselves, and in the meantime, like whatever tools that you're using are the perfect tools, but continue to be a seeker. Continue to seek, to learn, to educate, so that one day you can find the tools that give you permission and help you feel safe to open up and move forward, right? And sometimes it is having like a coach by your side, I'm working with someone right now who is struggling facing those things, but we get on the phone, we connect, we talk, and we find the best way for him, right? Because sometimes we're so stuck in our heads, like we can't even find the best way for ourselves. And we just sit there and we beat ourselves up because we're not doing anything. And it's like, now let's find the best way for you first. And then we can continue to move forward. And the cool thing is like every individual on this planet is so unique. So every person who's listening to it, every person who, might come across this is just remember that you're going to have a very unique way of processing information, of transforming and moving forward. And even if you pay attention and look at your life and be like, well, what were the best ways that helped me to face these fears, that to help me face these emotions and not run from them? You'll have a very specific set of things that you have found useful, and you can incorporate more of that. I highly suggest that. There's a reason why I love doing the specific stuff I do today because it worked the best for me. So it's like, I am dedicated to it. It worked like crazy for me. So it's like, find that pattern in your life where things are already working and just do more of it, right? Do more of those things as well, because that's quite inspiring. And how can you go deeper and how can you understand more and what else can you learn? So that's really, really cool. And yeah, when we think about facing these dynamics and these things, sometimes we do think like, I could just push it down. It's not a big deal. I could just like get rid of it, or I got rid of this person. Like, I think my favorite thing is just people continuing to tell me, "I don't ever have to talk to my mom or dad or my brother or sister again because they're out of my life." And then all of a sudden we're working on the boss or the ex or the current partner, and it's like, "Oh, it just reminds me of my mom. Oh, it reminds me of my dad." And I'm like, "That's because you're trying to avoid it." And it's like, "Are you ready to work on it?" So we kind of have a good giggle and laugh. So we think that you can avoid it, but the truth is that you can. And the pattern just keeps repeating until we do the work internally to clear the charge. And then the funny thing is, the same person can do the same thing and it doesn't impact you anymore because you've done the work. You've cleared that emotional charge. And that's where you get to have a different experience. And you don't know how far this actually moves right through. I have a fun one. I had no idea how far this moves, like into my physical body. I was working on a financial block. It was hysterical because I told my husband, I was like, I want help with this one. I think it's like there's something from when I was a kid and I feel like I was like 6 years old and I see a piggy bank and I'm freaking out, man. And so we go back in time and he's taking me through the process and stuff. And what we uncover, I was freaking out. I had $1.10 stolen from me. So that freaked me out. It wasn't a big deal, by the way. My 3-year-old cousin accidentally took it home because we were playing in the room and I totally got it back. And it's just it's not a big deal. But at 6-year-old, my brain was like, money is scarce, money is gone, money, like I could lose it, right? And so after we did all this clearing and, asked all the questions to balance out the perceptions of that little 6-year-old girl, it was really cool because even the next day, I was buying eyeglasses for reading, and they're quite expensive when you get prescription glasses, right? Like it's the first time I bought them, and I was like, "Huh, did not realize they were that price." But then when he put it down, it was the first time that I saw the price tags on a high item and I didn't feel anxiety. And I can afford it. So it's not that it's giving me anxiety because I can't afford it. It gave me anxiety because of all well, if I spend this money, it might go away. If I do this, it's not going to come back in. And all this panic from 6-year-old. So it's so funny that one thing that my intuition told me to go to has just cleared a significant quantity of daily anxiety that I have when I'm making important purchases. It's crazy. And when I tell you, like, I'm very meticulous with this because of how much it impacts. Another one that I want to share, which is really important too, my past sexual experience as a kid, right? So this is a bigger one that we can kind of see as like more common, I guess, trauma, but I'm sure people are going to relate to the stealing money one. Uh, so I had a sexual experience with my best friend's dad, right? And I don't like to call it rape anymore because I'm very grateful of the experience. If I had to go through it again, I genuinely would because that's how much it gave me, both in the moment and present day. And it was wild because before that, anytime I met any older male that reminded me of him, I would get shaky, like my hands would shake like this. My voice would get really low and I'd start tearing up. And I just couldn't control it. And I was like, I don't know what's wrong. And it sometimes happened when with my yoga teacher who I still work with. It used to happen when I did privates with him. I finally tried to do one. And every time in between a posture, I would burst into tears. And I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. I'm so sorry. And he's like, it's yoga. We're just still going to do yoga. And I was like, I love you so much right now. And the second that I cleared that, all of that went away. Now I can have one-on-ones with my yoga teacher and not even have an issue. Now every time I, connect with the individuals that used to bring the shaking and the tears, it's completely gone. So when we say like face it, face it. You have no idea the snowball effect that it's going to have in your life and how it's going to occur and the degree that impacts every area of your life. It's 100% worth finding those solutions that you love the most. Definitely diving in deeper, learning more, engaging more, and even if you feel like, "Oh, I want a new strategy," it's like finding that next step too.
So if somebody wants to, make change in their life, what do you think the role of discipline is, and how does that apply to being able to make some of those changes?
Yeah, if you really, 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 truly want a specific change, right? And this is cool because we can pay attention to our language. If you don't really want something and you're shoulding yourself, you'll say, I should do this. I'm supposed to do this. I have to do this. I need to do this. The truth is you're not going to be disciplined in your should. So first, the really important thing is to pay attention and focus on what you would really love to shift. Where you say, I want this, I choose this, I would love to have this, right? And so that dynamic is important to connect to because I know since it's connected to your authentic self, your soul, your mission, your vision, your purpose, your values, you're going to be more disciplined there. That's one immediate way to get some quick discipline. And what's really cool, if you look in your life at areas that you're already disciplined, you'll notice a pattern and a theme come out. And you'll be like, yeah, those things are so important to me. They're my personal non negotiables. You have all these non negotiables you're already disciplined around. And what's cool is you can create your business, your life, and structure other things around those dynamics or similarities, which is fun. So that's the first thing is just pay attention to you because your values and purpose is the best discipline you'll ever have. And the other thing is really committing to it, is putting a structure around it. And this is where we want to have the mindset for it, which we start with, but then make sure you're putting in the strategy as well. Put in the structure that's going to be reasonable. Right. And especially when you're creating some level of change, whether big or small, you want to make sure you structure it in a way that's reasonable and you're going to execute on it. Because if you find that you're falling short on some components, right, or you're not doing it as fast as you thought you could, then maybe you did over exaggerate how quickly you could do it and then go in and reframe. This isn't a beat up process. Like when you put together a strategy and you execute things, it's actually a refinement and a fine tuning process of making sure that whatever you're doing, you're able to do every day. You're able to do it on the time frame and the timeline that you've put forward, and it's something important enough that it's actually valuable and it's going to make it happen. So yeah, you do the mindset component, but then really, really make sure you're breaking it down into an executable strategy. Because if it gets too overwhelming, you're just going to put it to the side and be like, oh, I just feel overwhelmed. It's too much, right? So really breaking it down. And it's not just strategy, it's execution. Don't forget the execution. Sometimes people love the strategy and they forget to execute. Uh,
Awesome. So, what are the top 3 actionable tips if someone's like, "All right, I'm ready to be disciplined. I want to change my mindset. I'm ready to take charge of it." What are the top 3 tips you would give to help people gain some leverage over their mindset if they're listening today and they want to make a change?
Yeah, I would figure out what you would love to create change in, right? Genuinely, what do you want to create change in? What's the very specific thing that you're hoping can transform, right? And that's the first step is just getting really, really, really clear on that. And the second step is education support, right? So there's no matter what I'm doing, I have some level of education I'm diving into to understand it to a greater degree. So I'm empowering myself, right? But then I also like to get the support from a coach or a consultant to make sure I'm getting the feedback. And the reason why I say education and support is because you want to make sure you're empowering yourself with information so you don't fall into the traps of shooting yourself, according to me, genuinely, or any other coach out there. Right? Like, you don't want to do that. You want to take the information, take the guidance, combine it with what you know so you can walk out with an empowered results. Right? My top clients are the ones who are not just trusting me and doing everything I say. I don't even tell them what to do. We just ask questions, charges. But like, that's the reality. You don't want to get in there and just having someone telling you how to live your life. Figure out what you would love to do, study and educate yourself, and find someone who can collaborate with you side by side so that you can get to that goal. And also start tracking it. Track it as well because we get really, especially when things are really valuable to us, we're like kids in video games where we beat a level and we're on the next level and we're there and we get there, right? The celebration is the experience itself. So technically, like I know people say celebrate all the time, but if you love what you're doing so much, you don't have to celebrate. The actual experience is the celebration. If you want to celebrate, go for it. But guaranteed, if you really truly enjoy this, the journey is part of the celebration. You get there and you're like, now I'm ready for the next step. And so, yeah, when you're disciplined and you're focusing on your life purpose and your mission, that's kind of how it feels. So it's really important to somehow be tracking your goals and tracking like what you're wanting to shift so that you can look back and be like, oh my gosh, I did shift that. I actually didn't even notice, but I did shift that. And I didn't even catch that I'm working on the next step. Right. And I have a client, this is just so good at this. Where consistently he'll be frustrated at one area of his life. And it's like, okay, but this is the next step because you already did this and we worked on this one for like a year. So like congratulations, by the way. And I'm like, now that we cleared that perception and misperception, it's like, okay, now what's the challenge? And then he's like, yeah, I did do it. And I'm like, yeah, you did do it. And I was like, we're just working on next stage. So we can get really caught up in I'm not doing enough. I'm not making it. I suck at this if we don't actually track our progress. So find a way to track it. Whatever works best for you, by the way.
Awesome. So I want to leave the audience with some encouragement. So we'd love to hear if there's any examples of maybe a transformation uh, for one of your clients, maybe a story that really drives home the power of implementing some of what we've talked about today in terms of changing people's mindsets, moving into that balanced gratitude state, being able to recognize and be honest with themselves about things that they want to change, setting those clear goals, getting disciplined. So they wanna do all that, but they wanna feel like it's worth it. Do you have any examples of
Yeah.
how that's played out with their clients?
Absolutely. So many examples. Like I think it's amazing because it's like I have an artist who disconnected from art, right? And just wasn't doing it at all, who wanted to get back into it, but now has repurposed it in a way that it's art and mindset actually, which is and experiences. And so now she's out in the world and she's created that whole new dynamic in that whole new business. I had a client who just was stuck in her head because she had a surgery that kind of went wrong, right? She had some serious issues with that. And so it's like we worked on that to clear the misperceptions and balance it. And the biggest thing that it gave her was presence with her son again, right? Because they had just had a baby and she was just so frustrated because she was just crying all the time over this surgery gone wrong. And so it's that dynamic. I have a client who again was stuck, wasn't working, and we shifted these misperceptions, these dynamics around business, and now she's doing what she loves. Another one who decided to again stop working. Everyone seems to snap. Now I'm seeing a pattern. They're all stopping working and then they come to me and then they get back on track, right? It's awesome. But now she's back on track and as opposed to just working in a company, she's gonna build her own business, right? Another individual and just wanted to focus on getting that vision out and continuing and carrying on with it. And so he kind of went from not knowing what he was gonna do in life and wanting to create those finances to actually having the finances that inspire him today, moving further and further with it and continuing to expand his vision to reach more and more people. So the things that we can do when it comes to personal development, and I wanted to give like multiple examples so people can relate in different ways, right? You can relate in different ways of different areas of life. Like it really is phenomenal. So it's like find that thing you would love to commit yourself to and really make a plan around it and get help when you have a gap because that'll get you there faster. And yeah, find those experts who can be of service to you. It's been one of the greatest gifts for me as well.
Yeah, I've learned a lot of things in building my company and building a career, building a family. In all the areas of my life, there's so many different areas that is the whole reason I started this show, that I wanna help people find leverage and get larger outcomes, better outcomes out of less inputs or the same input. Because we often, especially the West, have this idea that it takes more. It's always more. More is the answer. If I do more things, if I put more on my plate, if I commit to more, then I'll finally get what I've always been wanting. And frankly, of all those things I've ever done, nothing has created more leverage in my life for my time and for my happiness, for the outcomes that matter the most to me with my loved ones, in working on my own mindset. So I've definitely seen some of these principles you're talking about at play, and I want the audience to be able to hopefully see that and see the opportunity that it's not the external world. It's not the things that are happening around you. You have the opportunity to work through the things on the inside, the things in your spirit and your soul and your mind that are weighing on you, that are holding you down, that are really decreasing what you're able to experience. You can add more and more and more, and if it goes through a filter that stops you from experiencing it all, then it won't matter. It won't solve the problem. And so doing this work like Carly has talked about can allow you to open yourself up and experience more with less inputs, with the same inputs. And so it's such a critical aspect of leverage. And the closest point of leverage is your own mind. You can go further and further away and exercise leverage, but there's nothing that's going to get you a bigger result than working on yourself. So just wanted to share my experience on that I've seen this myself, and thank you, Carly. If people, want to get in touch with you, if they're looking for a coach, obviously that we know that you offer services both around business coaching and around mindset and personal development. Where should people go to get in touch with you?
Yeah, westcoastgrowthadvisors.com is the best. And then you can reach out to there directly, or you can find me on social media platforms.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on, and make sure to go check out Carly if you'd like to connect with her, and we'll run the outro.
Hey, before you go, I have a small request. Our mission is to empower as many people as possible to maximize their potential through the power of leverage. Could you help us in this mission by leaving a review on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube? And if you know just one person who would benefit from today's episode, would you please share it with them? Your support means the world to us, and we are thrilled to have you in the community. Thank you for being a part of our journey and helping us grow. You can find show notes for today's show and past shows at lessonsinleverage.com, which also has links to connect with me personally and connect with our various podcast channels across your favorite social networks. A big thanks to Solve.cloud, who sponsored this episode. They're a group of expert consultants that help SaaS and financial services companies to implement, optimize, and manage Salesforce.com. They can help you with custom integration solutions and are helping customers to implement some of the most important generative AI technologies. You can find them at solved.cloud. That's SOLVD.cloud is the URL. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.